It's time for a Wellness Revolution. Brought to you by Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Honest discussion on maintaining health and wellness naturally to enjoy a better quality of life.
He's the doctor fighting to let you keep your doctor.
Now, Dr. Stephen Hotze. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution podcast is brought to you by Physician's Preference Pharmacy, formerly Hotze Pharmacy.
Welcome back to Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution. This is part 2 of the conversation with Dr. Hotze and Sherry Rogers, talking about the 7 M's of disease.
Other parts of the keto diet that are very beneficial are what I've labeled the 7M causes of making us leader of chronic disease in the United States, and that would be medications, mercury, modified genes, mangled fats, mycotoxins, manufactured toxins, and managed care. If you follow all of those things, they're in this year's newsletter, and also we have coming up a test of 25 questions so that folks can test their doctor, and if any of them send in their physician's responses before the answers are published in January 2020, we will put their name and contact information if they want in the newsletter.
Go through
we're always looking for people who would know
Dr.
the chemistry of healing.
Go over the 7 M's again slowly. So
it's in this year's newsletter.
Right, but our
medications. First of all, the first one. You can't. In fact, most people are told to be on statins. That's so ridiculous because they actually create diabetes. Plus, they create Alzheimer's. Look at all the accidents where there's a sudden weird accident of a subway or a train, and what happens is one of the side effects of statins, which we detailed in the cholesterol hoax. Everything is at prestigepublishing.com, all the books and newsletters. One of the side effects is sudden amnesia. In fact, Dwayne Gravlin, who was not only an internal medicine specialist but an astronaut, was walking home from his just little jog, and all of a sudden he didn't know his wife of 40 years, he didn't know his house, and he had sudden amnesia. And what happens is when people have this, they have accidents, but by the time the accident is over with, they have recovered, so their memory is back, and no one ever knows what was the cause of it. And then, of course, we have the PPI, the protein pump inhibitors, Nexium. I mean, that just turns off your stomach acid, so you're bound to get every disease going. The ACE inhibitors actually, like lisinopril, they actually cause Alzheimer's. We have the evidence of that coming up in the newsletter. So the second M is mercury, because even though a lot of the keto people know that sugar and carbohydrates are a major cause of cardiovascular disease and all disease, they don't realize how potent the sugar is, because the mercury chloralkali process, and this is in the last 5 years of the newsletters with all the evidence, because I'm a junkie, a reference junkie. I insist on the evidence for everything. Anyway, the amount of mercury that contaminates silently high fructose corn syrup, basis of the American processed diet, the average consumption is equivalent to a mercury level that is the same as having one new mercury amalgam in your mouth every day of your life. That in itself can kill so many cardiac enzymes, brain enzymes, etc., bring on every disease. The third M is modified genes, genetically modified foods, as we showed last year in the newsletter. The glyphosate lowers the glycine, the sulfation, etc., a lot of detox pathways. And remember, there are only 2 causes for all disease. Doesn't matter what it's called. You can call it cancer, you can call it heart disease, you can call it Alzheimer's. There's only 2 causes. The nutrient levels go down and the toxicity levels go up. And these GMO foods, plus the Roundup, etc., and the inert ingredients, damage tremendously the detoxification pathways of the body. And in fact, we'll go on to the fourth one, the next one, because there's so much. You could do a whole session on each one of these, and you're just trying to get a quick snapshot of them. The fourth one is mangled fats, all the Transfats, obviously. We have literally changed the chemistry of the human animal in the United States. Because I have to say that because the levels of glyphosate, for example, are 6 times higher in Americans than they are in French people. And that's just part of the many things that add to the French paradox. It's not just wine, etc. Anyway, we have changed the chemistry. The cell membrane ratio of fatty acids, which we examine all 34 fatty acids when we do this panel on our readers over the phone. I consult in 24 countries with our readers on the phone when they want to have this crystal ball test done and interpreted. Anyway, the fatty acid levels have changed 20 to 30-fold. They are so backwards. It's not even. It's a wonder that we don't have more people than we already do who are sick. And as we've evidenced in the newsletter, now 1 in 8 kids at 25 is starting to get high blood pressure. 1 in 3 adults over 50 already has it. And on, all these diseases go. 1 in 8 adults has diabetes. Children have adult onset diabetes. Mm-hmm. We lead the world in chronic diseases. We are the leader because the FDA has condoned high fructose corn syrup, over-the-counter Nexium, everything, genetically modified foods, and the Transfats. They have allowed, as we've documented many times, legal lying to the consumer. In other words, a manufacturer who has trans fats in his potato chips, for example, can put on the label, open quote, no trans fats, even though there's over 500 milligrams of trans fats per 3 potato chips. But if he puts the ingredient size is 2 potato chips on the label, then that brings it less than 500, and he is legally able to lie to the consumer. And now, as you'll see in issues coming up in the newsletter, there's a worse fat on the horizon, which has been around for a while, but it's going to be more commonly used, and that's esterification, because there's no blood test for it, and there is no, because we test for trans fats, we see them. There's no blood test for esterification, and there are so many different ways that it manifests itself that there's no identification. So this will be another silent thing to make sure that we lead the world in chronic diseases.
Okay,
what's
number 5?
For the 7? Go ahead.
Go ahead. What is 5?
5 is mycotoxins, Geotrichum, Sporobomyces, Candida, etc. Most people have been weaned on antibiotics, and then they've had them throughout their lives for various reasons. And this creates leaky gut, which then goes on to create autoimmune disease. For example, thyroid antibodies, metabolites like tricarbaleate actually chelate out the mercury so that the person cannot, even if he takes mercury, he's still going to have a heart attack because he can't get enough in. It makes the enzyme thiaminase, which destroys vitamin B1. So even though he has kidney disease and heart disease that could be cured with vitamin B1, he can't absorb enough of it because it's destroyed even before it can get absorbed. And then, of course, the gut is called the second brain, so then you have the destruction of all the neurotransmitters of happy mood and memory. And, of course, the gut is half the immune system and half the detox system for the entire body. And again, what are the 2 causes? Nutrient levels go down, toxicity levels go up. So there you're screwed as long as the gut is not assayed, and we see these parameters in this 11-page assay that we do to look at as much of the biochemistry at once of the human body.
Let me underscore what Dr. Rogers just talked about the gut. It goes all the way back to the father of medicine. Hippocrates said, "Let food be your medicine, medicine be your food." Now, why is that important? Because your food goes into your gut, and you've got to have a healthy intestinal system. The pipes have got to be healthy. If you're going to be healthy, you've got to have the intestines healthy. And unfortunately, because of the use of antibiotics, which in some ways were a godsend for people who had serious infections when they invented penicillin, but the overuse of antibiotics and by physicians historically, somebody comes in with a sore throat or a runny nose, and let's just give you some antibiotics to keep you from getting something. Well, those antibiotics are meant to kill abnormal bacteria, but we all have bacteria in our gut with a little bit of yeast, but there's a balance. And when you kill off good, healthy bacteria, then the yeast overgrows, and that causes inflammation in the bowels, and you get leaky gut syndrome, and you get food particles passing in large amounts into the bloodstream, and the body making antibodies to them that gives you autoimmune diseases, autoimmune thyroiditis, arthritis, et cetera, and the way what they do is they want to give you, because you have all these symptoms. Now the next thing you know, you're on a host of other drugs, and as Dr. Rogers has said so well, you become toxic, and when you're toxic, you have symptoms. So you go to the doctor, and they give you drugs, which are toxins, which make you more toxic, so you become sicker quicker. And I've used that all the time. I give you credit most of the time, but you become sicker quicker on drugs. Now, let me mention something to you, and I may have told you this, Dr. Rogers, but back in when I graduated from medical school in 1976, my dad held a banquet for me. I was at University of Texas at Houston. He had a banquet for me at the Houston Club. And over dinner that night, he turned to me and he said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." Now, my dad was a very successful businessman and entrepreneur, had a manufacturing business. He turned to me and said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Son, don't poison your patients like all the other doctors do. Do you understand me?" This wasn't a request, it was a command.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, he did. And so that planted that in my brain, that seed of the Hotze Health and Wellness Centers, which grew up 13 years later in 1989 after a series of incidences with patients. And I'm going like this, these patients never get well. They're sick all the time. So that's when I got involved with Pan American Allergy Conference. And I think my first conference I went to in 1989, you spoke on Detoxify or Die, and made tremendous sense to me. And I began to understand how to help people get healthy and well. And you do it by making sure you detoxify them and make sure they have the proper nutrients in their body and good hormonal balance. You take care of the allergies and those sort of things, and it's made a huge difference. But you were very instrumental in that, because you spoke at that first conference that I attended back in 1989, or maybe you spoke with the second one in 1990. But this whole key, folks, is you've got to have a healthy gut to be healthy. So that's why what you eat is so critically important to your long-term health. Okay, we were on mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are toxins that come from funguses, molds in your body, that live in your body. And you can also be exposed to them in the environment, breathe them in. If you've got a home that's infested with mold and it puts off mycotoxins, that can make you terribly sick as well. And those measurements of mycotoxins in your body, in your blood, can be measured. So let's go on to number 6.
Well, number 6 is manufactured toxins. Everybody should start with Detoxify or Die and then go to the high blood pressure hoax, even if they don't have high blood pressure, because that will give them how to get rid of these toxins. The phthalates are the number one plasticizers: plastic water bottle, plastic infant formula bottles. Everything comes in plastic: ketchup, mayonnaise, mustard. I mean, it's the whole world, milk, etc. And these phthalates damage beta oxidation, which is a main way that fatty acids in the cell membrane and the insulin receptor get processed. If that were not enough, we have 85,000 toxins now in our environment, most of which have not been tested. They have huge implications in the human body. For example, the PFOA, things like Teflon, they're not only in most of our products in our air, they're even in foods and medications. They damage the fluoride molecules, damage the other molecules in our biochemistry. Do they ever think, how did doctors get 100 rats with cataracts so that they can experiment with cataract surgery for the young ophthalmologist? They merely give them Tylenol, FDA-approved Tylenol, and you can create 100 rats with cataracts. So anyway, Detoxify or Die shows you how to get rid of the phthalates, and then to go further is the detoxification in the high blood pressure hoax that is cheaper, safer than IV chelation, and it's done at home with suppositories that you don't sit for hours with IV, which actually the IVs load you up further with phthalates.
Right. Well, this is very important what she's talking about. So all of you that think, well, we're drinking clean water, we're buying it at the store, and it's in plastic bottles, and those plasticizers, the phthalates, BCP, all these things leach into the water, and you're drinking that, and it gets into your system. These are petrochemical products. Now we're exposed to those.
In fact, it was discovered at Tufts University. They were working with breast cancer cells in petri dishes, and they normally would add a carcinogen, a chemical to make the breast cancer cells go crazy, and then they would add a chemotherapeutic agent to try to figure out which ones were best to stop the growth of the breast cancer cells. However, in the middle of their experiments, before they had added the carcinogen, the cancer cells went crazy and multiplied viciously, because it turned out it was the plastics leaching out of the petri dishes that were the triggers for cancer growth.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this all the time.
And of course, no one knows about that.
No.
Well, so
in fact, it's really laughable, because I go through the records of many people who have end-stage cancers, and some of them, they're not my patients, they're my readers, and some of them have even kindly sent me like a suitcase of all of the evidence, their records, their doctor's letters saying there's nothing more we can do for them, and they've even met me so that I could examine them. And like when I was lecturing on the cruise ships, they would then stand up in the audience after I showed their MRIs, et cetera, and the doctor's letters, and it's 20 years later. They're totally well. They did it with diet. And that's you start with you are what you ate, then the cure is in the kitchen, and then macro mellow. It's the best way of reversing cancers that I've seen in 50 years of medical practice. It's not the only way, but anyway.
Well, what's number 7?
Number 7 is managed care, because every time you go to a doctor, he is handcuffed by his practice guidelines. And the practice guidelines are made by the, open quote, experts in the medical center, whose main livelihood is derived from doing research, which is funded by the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
So they lecture for them, they do their research, they prove their drugs. So no wonder when you look at the practice guidelines for anything like atrial fibrillation, does it say, oh, well, look at their RBC magnesium, their RBC selenium, their RBC copper, and their RBC zinc, and you'll probably cure it. And look at their 34 fatty acids, give them the right ratio, and you'll probably cure them, which we've done many times. In fact, I myself had atrial fib, so did my husband. We haven't had it in years. We know how to cure it. Anyway, when you look at the practice guidelines, what does it say? First, try this drug, then this drug, then this drug. And basically, for any cardiovascular disease, as we showed in the book, Is Your Cardiologist Killing You?, they have about 8 categories of drugs, then a couple of procedures, stents, ablation, etc., and then surgery, bypass. They have nothing else to offer. They never cure. In fact, they don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
So here's seven M's that cause you health problems. Over medication, you're medicated. Mercury in the environment, particularly.
In your diet.
Yeah, in your diet and in your mercury amalgams on top of it. Modified genetic foods, the GMO foods, mangled trans fatty acids, mycotoxins, which are mold toxins, manufactured toxins like the petrochemicals that we breathe, eat, drink, and lather on our body. Ladies are worse than men in this, and
they're all FDA approved. All this stuff is FDA approved.
They'll just slather this stuff on their body. My wife, I saw it several years back. I said, "Baby, what is this?" She goes, "That's my body lotion." I said, "It's full of petrochemicals. What are you doing? You quit taking it." We've got here at our pharmacy, we have natural oils and that we have that you can use that are fine. And I said,
I love your pharmacy.
And then of course it's managed care, which means the insurance companies are determining how a doctor has to treat his patient. So if your doctor's is on a managed care, he's being governed, and his practice he's being told how to treat his patients by the insurance companies, not by his own. He may go to a conference. He may hear Dr. Rogers and come back and want to implement all these great ideas. If he does, the minimum they slap his hand or they remove him from the panel, and then he can't make a living. He doesn't know how to make a living, so he's stuck on doing whatever the insurance companies say. Those are the 7 M's, and those are very good. I'm glad we went over that. Well, thank you, Dr. Sherry Rogers, for that valuable information. I always appreciate having you on the program, and we look forward to having you back soon. If you're interested in doing a 180 and taking charge of your health, then don't hesitate to give us a call at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Our number is 281-698-8698.
A special thanks to Physicians Preference Pharmacy, formerly Hotze Pharmacy, proud sponsor of Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution podcast.
Information provided on this radio program is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice and is not intended to replace the services of a physician, nor does it constitute a doctor-patient relationship. You should not use information from this radio program to diagnose or treat a health problem or disease without consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have or suspect you have an urgent medical problem, promptly contact a professional healthcare provider or call 911. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution radio program advises you to always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider prior to starting any new treatment or with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Any application of the recommendations from this radio program is at the listener's discretion.